Hello, my friend. Today I want to tell you about one of the most disappointing days of my life. It was the day I failed an important job interview. At that time, I thought I had lost a great opportunity. I felt embarrassed, disappointed, and angry with myself. But 3 months later, I understood something important. That failure was not the end of my story. In fact, it was the beginning of something much better. So let me tell you what happened. A few months ago, I was looking for a new job. I had been working at the same company for a long time, but I wasn't happy there anymore. The work was stressful, the salary wasn't very good, and I didn't feel that I was learning anything new. I wanted a change. One evening, while I was looking at job advertisements online, I found an interesting position at a large company. The job looked perfect for me. The salary was better, the working hours were good, and the office was not far from my home. I read the job description again and again. This is exactly what I want, I thought. I sent my application that night. For the next few days, I checked my email many times. Then, on Friday morning, my phone rang. "Hello, we'd like to invite you for an interview next Tuesday." My heart jumped. I was so excited. "Yes, of course." "Thank you very much," I answered. After the call, I immediately told my family. Everyone was happy for me. I started imagining my future at the new company. Maybe I would meet new people. Maybe I would learn new skills. Maybe this job would change my life. But there was one problem. I had never been good at interviews. When I have to speak in front of someone important, I often become nervous. My hands get cold. My heart beats faster. And sometimes my mind suddenly goes blank. Still, I told myself, don't worry. You can do this. During the weekend, I prepared for the interview. I searched for common interview questions and wrote down my answers. Tell me about yourself. Why do you want this job? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? I practiced answering these questions several times. By Monday night, I thought I was ready. But when Tuesday morning arrived, all my confidence disappeared. I woke up early, put on my best clothes, and looked at myself in the mirror. "You are ready," I whispered. But I didn't feel ready at all. When I arrived at the company, I saw several other people waiting for interviews. They looked calm and professional. Suddenly, I started comparing myself with them. They probably have more experience than me, I thought. Maybe they're better than me. And that was my first mistake. Before the interview even started, I had already lost confidence in myself. About 20 minutes later, someone called my name. I walked into a small meeting room. There were 2 interviewers sitting across the table. They smiled and greeted me politely. At first, everything was fine. They asked me to introduce myself. I answered quite well. Then they asked about my previous job. Again, I answered without much trouble. I slowly started to relax. Then one interviewer looked at me and asked, "Can you tell us about a difficult problem you had at work and how you solved it?" It was not a very difficult question. I had prepared for questions like this. But suddenly, my mind went completely blank. I couldn't remember the answer I had practiced. For a few seconds, I just sat there. The room felt strangely quiet. My heart started beating faster. I think... I tried to speak, but my words didn't come out clearly. I gave a short and confusing answer. The interviewer nodded and moved to the next question. But now I was even more nervous. I started making small mistakes. I spoke too quickly. I forgot simple words. And instead of looking at the interviewers, I kept looking down at my hands. When the interview finally ended, I already knew. I hadn't done well. I walked out of the building with a heavy feeling in my chest. On the bus home, I kept thinking about that one question. Why couldn't I answer it? I knew the answer. Why was I so nervous? 2 days later, I received an email. "Thank you for your interest, but we have decided to continue with another candidate." I stared at the screen for a long time. I had failed. That evening, I felt terrible. I didn't want to talk to anyone. All I could think about was my failure. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I don't have enough experience. Maybe I'll never find a better job. For a few days, I stopped looking at job advertisements. I wanted to give up. But then something happened. One evening, I opened the notebook I had used to prepare for the interview. I saw all the questions and answers I had written. And suddenly, I realized something. The problem wasn't that I wasn't good enough. The problem was that I wasn't prepared enough to speak under pressure. Knowing an answer in my head was different from saying it confidently in front of another person. So I made a decision. I would practice. Not for one day. Not just before another interview. I would practice every day. I started with only 15 minutes a day. I stood in front of a mirror and answered interview questions aloud. At first, it felt strange. Sometimes I laugh at myself, but I continued. Then I started recording my answers on my phone. When I listened to them, I noticed many problems. I spoke too fast. I used, too often. My answers were sometimes too long. So I worked on them. Little by little, I improved. I also started learning new vocabulary and practicing how to describe my experience. I watched videos about communication and body language. I learned to sit straight, smile naturally, and make eye contact. Most importantly, I learned that confidence doesn't always come before action. Sometimes, confidence comes because you practice something again and again. Weeks passed. One applied for several other jobs. Some companies didn't answer. One company rejected my application. But this time, I didn't stop. I told myself, every rejection is teaching me something. About 3 months after my first failed interview, I found another job advertisement. The position looked interesting. But when I saw it, I almost didn't apply. The company was bigger than the first company. The salary was also higher. They'll never choose me, I thought. Then I remembered the last 3 months. All those mornings in front of the mirror. All those recordings. All those mistakes. All that practice. So I clicked apply. A week later, I received an interview invitation. On the morning of the interview, I was nervous. Of course I was. But this time, nervousness didn't control me. Before I entered the room, I took a slow breath and said, I don't need to be perfect. I just need to do my best. The interview started. Then came a familiar question. Tell us about a difficult problem you faced at work and how you solved it. For a moment, I remembered my first interview. But this time, I smiled. I knew exactly what I wanted to say. I explained the situation clearly. I talked about the problem, what I did, and what I learned from it. The interviewer smiled. That's a very good example, she said. When I left the building, I didn't know if I would get the job, but I felt proud. I had faced something that once scared me, and this time I didn't run away from it. 3 days later, my phone rang. We'd like to offer you the position. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Really? The woman laughed. Yes, congratulations. I got the job. And surprisingly, it was better than the first job I had wanted so badly. The salary was higher. The team was friendly. I had more opportunities to learn. And I finally felt that I was moving toward the future I wanted. Sometimes I think about that first interview. What if I had passed it? Maybe I would never have practiced so hard. Maybe I would never have learned how to communicate with confidence. And maybe I would never have applied for this better opportunity. That experience taught me something I will never forget. Failure is not always the end. Sometimes failure is a teacher. It shows us where we need to improve. It pushes us to practice. It makes us stronger. And sometimes a closed door simply pushes us toward a better one. So if you are experiencing failure right now, don't think your story is over. Maybe you failed an exam. Maybe you didn't get the job you wanted. Maybe your plan didn't work. It's okay to feel disappointed. But after that, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Learn. Practice. Try again. Your next opportunity may be closer than you think. And one day, you may look back at your failure and say, I'm glad I didn't give up.